The University of Oklahoma and the University of Texas are officially leaving the Big 12 conference to join the SEC. The two colleges, OU and UT Austin, put out a joint statement. They said that they intend to stay with the Big 12 through June 30th, 2025. That's 4 years from now. And that date was put out there because that is when the Big 12's current media rights deal will expire. And Texas President Jay Hartzell said, "We plan to honor our current agreement and fairly allow the Big 12 to plan for their future with lots of warning." Like, so what are they have to have a plan for what to do without us. We're going to give them time. I don't buy any of it. None of it. Hey, pardon my French. Bullshit. No way. I don't think it's going to happen. Your plan, the way they talk about stuff, our plan, our this, our that, it's all easily to manipulate. Your plan can be adjusted and changed very easily. We intend to. We plan to stay. Okay. I don't think it's going to happen at all. I think there's too much money on the table. I think people get impatient. They want to make stuff happen. I want to make a prediction right now. This fall, 2021, I personally believe it's going to be the last time we see Texas and Oklahoma play football in the Big 12 ever again. Might be wrong. That's going to be a fun one to revisit in like March. But I personally think they're going to leave for the SEC as soon as possible. And again, there's just so much money to be made. Currently, leaving before 2025 because of the contract with the current Big 12 media rights situation, leaving would cost each school $75 to $80 million minimum to leave the Big 12 early. And the only way to avoid the buyout fee basically is if the Big 12 completely dissolved. And that might happen too. But here's my thought. Okay, pay $80 million to leave the Big 12. Then when you join the SEC, they pay you like $100 million. You make money, you pay the difference. You pay the buyout fee for leaving the Big 12, and you can still make money if you're Texas and Oklahoma. I just keep your eye on that. I think it's very likely Oklahoma and Texas leave the Big 12 far earlier than they are putting out there. So I believe Oklahoma and Texas will be gone much sooner than they're saying. Now, Oklahoma and Texas are the two biggest brands in the Pac-12. That's very obvious. There's a couple big stats that were put out, I think by The Athletic, where they said, hey, 33 of the 38 Big 12 regular season college football games that were nationally televised on ABC or Fox in the year 2018 or 2019, 33 of those 38 nationally televised games were Oklahoma or Texas games. They are pretty much the only draw to the Big 12. I apologize. I'm not, and I know I got a buddy out there who goes to Iowa State. I'm not trying to watch Iowa State, Kansas. I just don't care. I don't care about TCU. I don't care that much about Baylor. And these are 27 of the 30 most watched games from the Big 12 in that timeline were Oklahoma or Texas games. Those two programs are carrying the Big 12. The Big 12 is very, very top heavy. And so I think Oklahoma's going to go to the SEC and be competitive pretty quickly. They're a very competent football program. They're run by Lincoln Riley. They get amazing recruits. The SEC is just going to get them even better recruits and give them even more. What's the word? It's just going to legitimize Oklahoma. So Oklahoma is a juggernaut. Texas football is not. Not at all. Since I looked up, how has Texas done in the Big 12 in the last couple of years? Texas is 29 and 25. 29 wins, 25 losses in Big 12 play in the regular season since 2014. They went 5-4 in the Big 12 last year. In the Big 12, Baylor, TCU, Kansas, Iowa State. In 2017, Texas went 5-4 against the Big 12. In 2016, 3-6 in Big 12 play. 2015, Texas went 4-5 against the Big 12, 5-4 in 2014. Imagine what's going to happen when Texas's schedule changes from playing Texas Tech, Kansas, TCU, and Iowa State, and then you replace those cupcakes with Florida, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Auburn. They're a big brand. They're not a very good football program. And there's just no reality where Texas leaves the SEC. Sorry, where Texas leaves for the SEC. They leave the Big 12. They join the SEC. They have a tougher schedule. There's no reality where Texas goes to the SEC and does even better with their win-loss record. It's not going to happen. Texas and the SEC is just Tennessee football. It's kind of crazy, the parallels. They're both toxic programs. They have massive fan bases. They're both orange, and neither program dominates or will dominate in the SEC. Texas is... I'm going to watch them. It'll be fun. I'm really excited to watch Oklahoma and Texas join the SEC. But if I'm a Texas fan, I'm not excited. I'm actually very nervous about what's going to happen. So, again, my first reaction, Oklahoma, Texas, leaving the Big 12, joining the SEC. I thought, I love it. I want to watch that. That sounds awesome. Let's go. I think that's phenomenal. And I like chaos, and I like interesting. And that makes college football even more interesting. After that, though, rumors and reports started coming out. Apparently, the SEC is talking to, I don't know, Ohio State, Michigan. It's been reported that the SEC has contacted Clemson, Florida State as well about joining the SEC. Apparently, the SEC has their sights set on becoming a 20-team super conference. And you're like, oh boy. And that gets the juices flowing even more. I'm even more excited about that. Imagine all of the biggest brands in college football converging in one conference. They play each other every year. They compete for a championship. Would we even care about the national championship? Wouldn't it be more about who wins the SEC? It'd be more interesting. It's very possible. This is the fear. It's probably not going to happen, but it's very possible the SEC says, hey, screw everybody. We're doing our own thing. We're literally going to have our own season, our own insular little thing. I mean, I've even heard the number 24 teams thrown out as the potential number the SEC could land on. A mega super conference. Again, I love it. Imagine Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida State, Michigan. It goes on and on and on. Georgia, all of these massive brands all together in one conference playing each other. I'll watch that in a heartbeat. That's the thing. I don't have allegiance to anything. I just want to watch good football. That sounds amazing. Sounds kind of like what, the England and the Europe kind of freaked out when their super conference or whatever, super league or something, and I don't know, soccer's crazy and complicated, I don't understand it. But apparently they proposed a massive super league and it fell apart. This feels like that, except it might actually happen. So we know for sure Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC. Then maybe also Michigan, Ohio State, Clemson, and or Florida State could join them in that conference. So the question is, if that happens, or if even some of that happens, what's going to be the result for the rest of college football? You still have the other Power 5 conferences, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. Let me say right now, not a prediction, it's just what I believe. I guess it is. It's what I believe is going to happen. I believe the Big 12 is going to completely die. The Big 12 currently, without Oklahoma and Texas, has 8 teams. You can't really have the Big 12 with 8 teams. It's already weird they only have 10. Now, I would tell you, here's what you got to keep your eye on. This is the movement you need to watch. Keep your eye on Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. What do they do? If I was running any of those programs, I would not just sit on my thumbs and wait like a victim, waiting to see what happens to you. I'm a man of action. I don't like letting other people dictate what happens to me. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to make a counter. I'm going to make something happen. I'm not waiting for the conference to die. If I am West Virginia, I don't care about the Big 12. My priorities, my livelihood is more important than the Big 12 conference itself. And I believe we're about to see dominoes and musical chairs. Screw the Big 12. You need to worry about your own self-interest. If Texas Tech, I don't know where they came from. Oklahoma State, that's why, if Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and or West Virginia bail, any one of those, but especially if multiple schools bail from the Big 12, it's over. It's not going to stay together. The Big 12 is going to fail. If I'm West Virginia, you're already a bit geographically isolated from the rest of the Big 12. I'm like, hey, Big 10, we share a border with Ohio. You might lose Ohio State. Can we jump in? Can we take your place? again, geographically, West Virginia is actually closer to Big Ten schools than they are compared to down south in Texas. West Virginia, again, they border Ohio. They're actually they're kind of, they're like this fringe Midwest area. I know it sounds weird, but look at a map. It blew my mind. And I don't believe that West Virginia would join the ACC because the ACC already has Virginia and Virginia Tech in their conference. Why would you want to compete against your local area? Go do your own thing. Be separate. Be unique. I wouldn't, if I were West Virginia, I wouldn't want to join a conference that already had Virginia and Virginia Tech. Look, I believe that the Big 12 is going to dissolve, disappear. They're gone. I also believe the Pac-12 and the Big 10 are going to grow. They're going to probably have to change their names. It's already weird. I think the Big 10 is more. I think the Big 10 already has 12 schools. 14 even. I lost count. It's crazy. The Big 10 may lose Michigan and Ohio State. Yes, those are big brands. It's not going to be comfortable, but the Big 10 will be okay. The Big 10 has tons of heritage. I think it's way more sustainable what the Big 10 has left over than what the Big 12 does. They can survive. And if I were Penn State, for example, if Ohio State and Michigan left the Big 10 and I'm running Penn State University in, Happy Valley State College, whatever it's called, Penn State, I'd be happy to be the new top dog and biggest, most dominant brand in the Big 10. I'm like, okay, hey, all our competition left. Even if we're not winning the conference every year, we're still the biggest fan base and biggest, most passionate group of people left in the Big 10. Happy to dominate that. The other question is, what would happen to the ACC without Clemson? Imagine if they lose Clemson and Florida State, what do they have left? They have Louisville, Duke, UNC. And when you think of Louisville and Duke and North Carolina, what do you think of? Unfortunately, it's not football. It's basketball. The ACC, is a basketball conference, really, if they lose Clemson and Florida State. And I also believe Miami, similar to Penn State, would stay in the ACC, and it's getting complicated now. But if Clemson leaves and so does Florida State, and you're left alone in the ACC, if I'm Miami, I'm like, hey, I'm happy to be the big dominant brand left in the ACC. It might help us. We can win the conference. It'll boost our record. And as far as national standing, trying to get into the college football playoff, it makes more sense for Miami to stay put rather than try to join the SEC or something crazy like that. No, hey, dominate your little pond. I'm happy to be the biggest fish in a small pond. That is good in the eyes of college football, because if you win your conference and you go undefeated, hey, you're entered into the college football playoff. So here are some teams I want people to pay attention to in college football. Pay attention to Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, Florida State. Those are, for obvious reasons, they might want to join the SEC. Now, will Miami stay in the ACC? I think they should be the biggest, most dominant name brand there. Will Penn State stay in the Big Ten? I also believe they will. Again, you're happy to have an opportunity to dominate your conference without the top-heavy, dominating teams there anymore. Now, keep your eye on West Virginia. Geographically, they are much closer to the Big Ten than the Big 12. And if there's only 8 teams left, I would have no reason to have any allegiance left to the Big 12. You got to worry about yourself first. What will Texas Tech and Oklahoma do? Could they also pull out of the Big 12? Again, you got to counter. Don't wait for your fate to be decided by somebody else. Could Cincinnati be elevated from the Big Ten, to the Big Ten to replace maybe Ohio State? I mean, if Michigan and Ohio State leave, maybe West Virginia and Cincinnati join the Big Ten. Hey, solved. It's not perfect, but you got another Ohio school, you got West Virginia. I think that makes sense to replace them. The people you leave, it's certainly no compensation. They're not as big of football brands, but I think that's possible and could happen. Houston could join a Power 5 conference. They are quietly one of the biggest colleges in America. Keep your eye on Houston. They could elevate. Now, if I was the Pac-12, this is interesting to me. If I was the Pac-12 commissioner, there are 4 schools in particular I would target and try to poach and make join. I would try to convince them to join my conference. Number 1 is Notre Dame. Notre Dame makes so much sense. Not having a conference, being independent, is eventually going to hurt Notre Dame. It hasn't seemed to do it quite yet. It almost did during COVID because they couldn't fill out a schedule. They had to temporarily basically join the ACC. Now, traditionally, Notre Dame plays USC and Stanford every single year, except for last year because of COVID. And Notre Dame talks really big. I have a buddy, I hated him in high school. He was a rival quarterback. I felt like he had a silver spoon, right? Got handed a lot of stuff. He went to Notre Dame, and he talks so big. Notre Dame really, really loves the smell of their own farts. They really think they're awesome. And so if they think they're this dominant college football program, prove it. Join the Pac-12. If you dominate the Pac-12, they certainly act like they would. If Notre Dame joined the Pac-12 and dominated, that'd be good for them. So prove it. Prove that you're this big dominant brand. Join the Pac-12. Go undefeated. If that's what you say you would do anyway, great. You'll be in the college football playoff every single year. Now, the second team I would target if I was the Pac-12 is actually Hawaii. I know it's weird. It's not just because I'm moving there. Hawaii is in the process of not only building a new stadium. Hawaii is unique because it's one of the schools that could join the Pac-12 and instantly be elevated to a bigger brand. Hawaii has two big problems in recruiting. One, they lack money. And two, is that the problem is that playing for Hawaii football does not get viewed as a pathway to the NFL. Now imagine if you played a Pac-12 schedule and you had more money, you had better facilities, and hey, you're playing a tougher schedule. And it's pretty clear you can go from Hawaii football to the NFL. You're playing better competition. Think of how many recruits Hawaii loses every year to bigger programs. I just think two come to mind immediately. Three, Marcus Mariota. Tua Tagovailoa. Monte Te'o. We see so many guys throughout college football from Hawaii not playing in Hawaii. Part of that is because a lot of guys, and I have a lot of friends who grew up in Hawaii, I get it. They want to leave the islands. They lived there their whole life. I'm leaving where I grew up. I understand the desire to leave where you are. But a lot of guys might stay if they knew they could stay on Hawaii and have a legitimate shot at the NFL. Right now, they're a Mountain West school. It's not going to happen. But in the Pac-12, it's an easier sell in recruiting. Hey, we're playing Cal, Stanford, USC, Utah, Oregon. We have better facilities, more money. The campus sells itself. The on-campus living experience in Hawaii is easy to sell the recruits. You'd get good recruits from Washington who want to get away from the rain. So if you had Hawaii as a desirable recruiting location because of a Pac-12 conference schedule and more money from a Pac-12 media deal, that's awesome. And also, there's a ton of money to be made. Hawaiians are all over the country, and they're very loyal. If their program was on a bigger stage, the Hawaiian people, I think, would step up. I've got many friends. I have so many friends from Hawaii, and they have gear. It reminds me, they're loyal. They're loyal to their program. Plus, here's another thought, and I don't know if they would want people to do this, but Pac-12 fans would be happy to go watch games in Hawaii. Take a flight, go to their new stadium, whether it's Washington State. If you're playing a road game in Hawaii, you're there, you're going. And so it's already a destination. I just think it makes a lot of sense. I see an opportunity if I was a Pac-12 to poach Hawaii, elevate their program, and make a lot of money with them. Number three, I would also pursue, if I were the Pac-12 conference, I would pursue BYU and try to have them join my conference. The better schedule would help legitimize BYU. So BYU gets one thing out of joining the Pac-12. They get a legitimized schedule. They no longer would have people saying, well, he didn't play anybody. It's, we played an entire Pac-12 schedule. You can't doubt us anymore. Also, the rivalry game between BYU and Utah, which I believe didn't happen last year, I think because the Pac-12 didn't let you play out-of-conference games, non-conference games, that's the word I'm looking for. Imagine the BYU-Utah rivalry game being an official Pac-12 conference game, siphoning some of that money towards the Pac-12. That gets a lot of people. And by the way, BYU's got a massive fan base, Mormons all over the country. Let's acknowledge what it is. It's a Mormon university. It's a big religion. There's people everywhere. It's another big brand. If I'm the Pac-12, I would be happy to have that brand a part of because of the amount of people, the following, the money behind it. Hey, I would love to have BYU football, the brand, a part of the Pac-12. Let's all make money together. We help you. You legitimize us. We get your fan base as a part of the Pac-12. Number 4, I would also target Boise State. This has been talked about for a long time. Boise State, I wish it's probably the least convincing argument I have. I can't think of any clever reason other than it makes sense. It would be interesting. It'd be exciting. I'd love to see that happen. If the Pac-12 is looking for teams to join, Boise State would make a lot of sense. They're a team that for a long time has felt like they could elevate to a higher level of play, especially during the Chris Peterson era. Unfortunately, that's over. I want to mention one thing. I saw a story out there that apparently the Pac-12 commissioner, George Kliavkoff, I think is how you say his name, is in talks with the Big 12 commissioner, or the Big 12 in general, about potentially merging the conferences. I hated that. I totally dismissed it when I saw it. It's just stupid. If the Pac-12 is actually doing that, they're idiots. I really don't know why the Pac-12 would try to merge with the Big 12. I don't want Kansas football if I'm the Pac-12. How does that help you? And also, who cares about the Big 12? That's not your problem. It's not your problem to take care of the Big 12. It's your problem, I mean, this is heartless, but to crush your opponents, to poach whatever teams they have that can be valuable to your league, and move on. Let the Big 12 die, steal the teams that you want, and then move on with your life and let Kansas figure out their own destination. Now, the final question in this conversation or thing to talk about here is the SEC is considering that they might add another conference game, a ninth. They have 8 current conference games in the SEC you play on their schedule. They might add a 9th game after they add Texas and Oklahoma to their conference. And it's very interesting because, again, currently they play 8 conference games. They might add a 9th. When you play 4 non-conference games right now, you play 12 games in a college football season, 8 conference games, 4 non-conference games. Usually you play crappy non-conference schools like Rice, Citadel, Nicholls State. Occasionally you see like an Auburn play, Oregon, but they leave it up to you. And if you want to be an SEC program that plays nothing but freebies during the non-conference schedule, you're very entitled to do that. Now, the SEC conference believes that adding a 9th regular season game will bring in more money. And I think it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem, potentially. Because they are right. If you have Florida playing Mississippi, that will make more money than Florida playing Rice. Because that's a more interesting, intriguing matchup. A lot of people, when their team plays Rice or Citadel, they pay attention for like the first couple quarters. They're up by 50. They turn it off, move on with their day. It's a Saturday that's not that interesting. So the argument in favor of adding an extra conference game is to say, we can make more money because we have more meaningful games people will want to watch. And that is true. For sure. Absolutely. But I would warn the SEC, you don't want to be like the Pac-12 conference. Every year, the Pac-12 is incredibly competitive. They beat up on each other. Nobody dominates. There's no top dog in the Pac-12. They have like one team with one loss, and then they lose to Washington every year. Every year, it's like they're doing so good, and then one team loses, and they lose all their legitimacy. And when you have no top team that stands out, and that probably wouldn't happen in the SEC, but here's my point. Here's where we're going with this. Having teams with a winning record is good. You kind of want teams padding their record because it makes them more intriguing later in the year. Beating Rice or Citadel is actually valuable. Is it kind of a waste of a week? A little bit. But it pads an extra number on your win-loss record. Florida playing Georgia is more compelling when both teams have a good record. When Florida's 8-1 and Georgia's 7-2, that's way more exciting to watch than it is when Georgia's 5-4 and Florida's 4-5 or 6-3. It's just not as intriguing. It's when you have teams that are, once you get 3 losses or more, a college football program becomes less interesting. So, hey, maybe adding an extra conference game will help the SEC get more eyeballs week to week. But then also those big games late in the year will have less meaning if teams do not have as many wins. So consider the value of padding your team's records. If you're going to make, it's possible, if the SEC has 24 teams, I would just say we're only playing conference games. Screw you guys. We're going to just dominate, do our own thing. You could be insular completely if you're the SEC, if you want to be. But keep your eye on that story. What will happen? Will the SEC, in fact, add another conference game? And if they do, what will be the impact of that?